I'm very conscious of the fact it's 7 o'clock on what day is it? Thursday? It is Thursday, right? And I'm between you and a decent drink, so I'll try and make this as entertaining as possible. And I discussed with Nick a topic, and I came up with 7 lessons from science that will improve team collaboration. So just so I know who's in the room, how many people here are actually running a team? That's about 40%. How many people are members of a team? Jolly good. And how many people just came for the free beer and realized they're in the wrong room? Right, great. Okay, so
Team of one.
a team of one. I love it. So a couple of agreements. The first thing is the science that I talk about, there is no such thing as 100%. And what I mean by that is 100% of the things that I'll share with you don't apply to 100% of the people 100% of the time. So in neuroscience, the social psychology, behavioral psychology, anything above 80% is considered spectacular results-wise. Okay. So the second thing is one of my worst habits, I've got to be honest, is I will sit when somebody's speaking and I tend to cross my arms and sit in slight judgment. Do I, A, like this person? B, do I agree with what they're saying? And if I hear something, it's an unconscious thing, if I hear something I don't agree with, I tend to switch off at that point. So I'm going to ask you to be a bit more open-minded than I am and stay with me, okay? There may be things that I say we go, oh, I'm not sure, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Are we all okay with that?
Yep.
Shall we just say yes, Alan?
Yes, Alan.
Brilliant, just so I know you're still alive. Right, now.
Are you happy? Sorry to interrupt. Are you happy with questions as we're going along?
I'm going to talk for 30 minutes and then have questions at the end, just to make sure that you get as much value as possible. Are we okay with that? Yep. All happy? Great. Okay, so 2 fish are swimming along the water, and an older fish comes by and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 younger fish go, "What the hell's water?" And really what this is an analogy for is what I'm going to talk about today, the water. The kind of context within which we all sit in the workplace. And there's a great quote from David Foster Wallace: "The most obvious and important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about." So I'm going to shine a light on some of the things that we intuitively feel, but it's difficult to understand them until somebody sort of states them in a really obvious way. One of the things that's happening right now, and it's predominantly because of the tech world, is that there's an enormous shift occurring in organizations. And it's not the shift from the industrial age to the information age. It's the shift from understanding that organizations are not mechanistic, don't work like a Newtonian sort of view of science. They're organic. And as a consequence of that, how we lead has to change enormously. In the old days, certainly when I started leading, you just used to kick somebody up the backside, and that was pretty much good enough. That doesn't really work anymore, okay? Particularly when you're in environments, everybody in this room has what I call a high cognitive load. You do jobs that are very demanding on your brain, you're using creativity, your analytical thinking, and so on and so forth. In that kind of environment, when people are stressed, they don't work very well. So it is changing. It's changing dramatically. So in terms of starting today, to give you an idea of what that water is, I want you to turn to somebody next to you who is somebody ideally that you don't know. And I want you just for 2 minutes each, share with them one great life challenge that you've overcome. All right? One great life challenge that you've overcome. So we'll do that now, just for a couple of minutes. Have a wee chat. Over to you. Right, first thing, did everybody notice the energy levels obviously just gone up a fair amount, yes? And secondly, when you are listening and talking to your new best friend, did your perception of them change slightly? Yeah? Sort of improved a little bit, you felt some kind of, at least some kind of connection. So the new branch of, well, an emerging branch of neuroscience is called social cognitive neuroscience. And we, as we all know, are social beings. We are genetically predisposed to working together. So collaboration is innate in us. And that little conversation was me just kind of getting the juices flowing from a social cognitive perspective. So I wanted to set a little bit of context before I share with you these 7 remarkable insights from science that will massively improve the collaboration of you. I've suddenly got a very American name, right? There's a rah, rah, rah. So we're going to set a little bit of context. First thing, let's do a quiz. All right, so I'm just going to throw up some random numbers. Oh. Now, as a percentage of body weight, and we're going to do a show of hands, okay? As a percentage of body weight, how much does your brain weigh? Is it 2% of your body weight? Show of hands, anybody? 3 people? 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. 9% of your body weight? Ooh, yes, we're 9%ers. 15%? Yep. 20%? And then 25%. Okay, the answer, this is from a lady called Hilary Scarlett, who's a neuroscientist. The answer is 2%. Your brain weighs 2% of your overall body weight. Now, here's the next question. In terms of energy consumption, how much energy does your brain consume? 2%, 9%, 15%, 20%, or 25%? So we'll do it again. Right, here we go, because I went quickly there, but people were like... All right, if you think that your brain consumes about 2% of your overall body energy, raise your hands. Okay, jolly good. 9%. Thank you. 15%. A few more. Yeah, okay. 20%. About 12 people. And then 25%. Okay. So the winners are the 20% group. You get 3 gold stars and 5 bags of cheesy Wotsits. Just see Nick after the end of this talk. Right. So what does that really mean? What it means is that because all of you are in a high cognitive load environment, the reason you feel so tired at the end of the day is because that little 2% brain of yours is burning a massive amount of energy. And this is important to understand the context of leadership, because we kind of assume our brain is different to the rest of our body. And now we can just keep flogging it and flogging it and flogging it. And it turns out we can't. Okay? So this is a context. Now, next, there are 2 parts to the brain, broadly, whether you talk to neuroscientists or psychologists. They'll have different terms, but it goes something like this. There is the survival part of the brain, and then there is the sort of reward part of the brain. There is the emotional part of the brain, which is what psychologists would say, and then there is the sort of planner, part of the brain. Now, when you look at this image of the elephant and the elephant rider, my question is this: which of those 2 is the emotional brain? So if it's the elephant, sorry, I'm not clear with my question. I'll try it again. If it's the elephant or the elephant rider, which is the emotional part of the brain? Is it the elephant or the elephant rider? Hands up if it's the elephant. Jolly good. Hands up if it's the rider. Okay, all my elephant friends, you get 20 bags of cheesy Wotsits and 15 gold stars. Please say Nick again. So here's the thing. We think we're quite rational people. Right, so we sit on top of our elephants, planning and being strategic and all of that kind of good stuff. And then we're in our teams, and then somebody said, do you know that piece of software we've been working on for the last 2 months? Yeah, head office don't want it anymore. They want you to build an app instead. And then all of a sudden, the elephant just goes rampaging around the room. And the rider's hanging on for dear life. And most of the time, particularly when I go into tech environments, the elephant is running the show. We think that the planner, the sort of, the thinker is running the show, but because people are stressed, the elephant's running the show. Are we all good so far? Everyone's looking thoroughly miserable at this point. It gets better, okay? So there is a solution. That's the context. Now, 70% is emotional, is geared towards survival, 30% is geared towards reward. And this is profoundly important, whether you're a team member or a team leader. Profoundly important. You're kind of up against it slightly. So, what happens when we're stressed? Now, what I used to do is I used to say to a group like this, right, does anybody hate public speaking? Actually, does anybody hate public speaking? Right, and then I would take this wonderful gentleman and I would bring him down here and show you a physical view of what stress looks like, because mostly because people start perspiring and then their heart starts to beat really fast and so on and so forth. But I'm going to do something slightly different. I was talking to a guy in Bristol at the Natural History Unit, the BBC, and he was telling me he was out in Africa and they were filming the Pride of Lions. And he was the sound man and the cameraman was an old pro. And a male lion stood up and roared at them as soon as they put the gear down. He said, I started to sweat. He said, the cameraman didn't move. He said, and then this male lion moved its body around to face us and padded out about 3 steps and roared, whoa, like that. And he said, at that point, the sweat's just pouring down my back. This cameraman didn't flinch. Eventually, he sort of trotted towards us, stopped about 100 yards away, and roared again. He said, at that point, I started putting on a new pair of Nike trainers. And the cameraman looked at me and said, mate, you'll never outrun the line in those trainers. And he said, sod outrunning the line so long as I outrun you. Now, it's a funny story, but there is an actually really important point. The point is this. When we're in a stressed state and in a stressed environment, you will see what I call these kind of symptoms. Silo mentality, people not sharing resources. Does any of this sound familiar, by the way? Yeah. Defensiveness. That coding is wrong. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I'll send an email to your boss, and that email will go to another boss who'll send it back to me. Open bickering, office politics. Now, Simon Sinek, who talks a lot about this kind of stuff, calls that classic cortisol environment. Cortisol is produced when we're stressed. So, where we need to get to is the positive state. And the leading researcher in this area is a lady called Barbara Fredrickson. What do positive emotions do to us? And basically, what Barbara has shown is that they were key to what she calls the broaden and build theory. They were critical to us going from little bands of hunter-gatherers to small hamlets of cooperative, collaborative people, to towns, to villages, to cities, and so on. Positive emotions are the driver of collaboration. And they are the driver of how we've developed as a society. Our prefrontal cortex, really, so the theory goes, developed because we started going beyond groups of 10 and 20, and we can pretty much hold a group of around about 150 relationships. So those relationships can only flourish if there is a sort of positive underbelly. Okay? This is all the water. And this is what's entirely missing from many of the organizations that I go into. And I should explain that what I do. I should have explained who I am, shouldn't I? I do leadership training. Okay, but I've built 2 tech companies from the ground up as well. And I've burned out. So not only have I lived the dream, I've lived the nightmare as well. Okay, so I'm passionate about getting this kind of science across because it'll actually save your lives. Or it'll certainly make a big impact on your team and how they perform and whether they enjoy their work or whether they leave. All right. How are we feeling, ladies and gentlemen? Still happy? Yeah, great, okay, good. Emotions are contagious. We've all known it experientially. You know, after you have a really fun coffee with a friend, you feel good. And when you have a rude clerk in a store, you walk away feeling bad. The emotional brain responds to an event more quickly than the thinking brain. Daniel Goleman. All of us have experienced it. Checked in a hotel, the person behind the desk is really rude to us, and it stays with us. For half an hour. They've forgotten about you. Didn't recognize you the next time you come down, but you still carry that. So we are emotional beings, and the emotional workplace is contagious. Now, so of the 7 great insights from science that will help improve collaboration, I want an honest answer to this question, ladies and gentlemen. When you get up in the morning, are you a Snow White kind of character, so bluebirds on your shoulder? Raise your hands. Just Nick. No, where there's 7 of us. Okay, who is a naturally kind of grumpy person in the morning? It's okay, there's no shame in that. Just for those who are watching the video, that's like 70 odd people in this room. Now, the thing is, how you show up has an effect. That's the only kind of point I wanted to get across with this. How you show up has an effect. And it actually doesn't matter whether you're the team leader or a team member. Okay? So we've all heard the saying, you know, one bad apple spoils a barrel. We've all experienced it ourselves. How many people have been in an environment where there was one team member, whether a leader or just a team member, who was just negative, pain in the ass, right? Toxic. And it affects everyone, right? It affects everyone. So please take seriously how you show up in the workplace, because it does have an effect. Anybody got children? Okay, some people are like, yeah, far out, man, yeah. How you come home has an impact. They pick it up, run for the hills, or they come and hug you. Next, energy management, the most misunderstood aspect of the modern workplace. Has anybody read The Power of Full Engagement by Jim Lowe and Tony Schwartz? Highly recommend the book. So how many people here do exercise regularly? Oh, that's very impressive. How many people then go to the gym at 9 in the morning, stay there until 7 o'clock at night, and do not stop training? No, because our bodies would break eventually, wouldn't they? So why is it that we do that to our brain pretty much every day? So what Jim and Tony talk about a lot is energy management, and they talk about the importance of strategic breaks, strategic recovery time. So a typical day looks something like this. So this is your stress system, right? The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And ideally what you want is something like you get into work, you go through your emails, you see a name that stresses you out, but then you have a bit of recovery time and so on and so forth. But that's not how people work at all, because people really don't understand this science. So what they do is, on their way to work, they do their emails after having a coffee and probably about 5 hours to 6 hours of broken sleep. They then start working flat out as fast as they can and maybe have a sandwich at their desk. At the end of the day, they have a massive bottle of wine, watch The Apprentice, and then try and sleep. Sound familiar? Okay, and then we do that day in and day out. Now, I'm obviously exaggerating to make a point, but that was how I worked in the corporate world at a senior level. 12 hours a day for 3 years. And then wondered why I was starting to show signs of burnout. As an entrepreneur, I was even worse, because you don't switch off on the weekends. You keep going, you keep going, you keep going, and then eventually at 3 o'clock in the morning, admitted to hospital with heart problems. That weren't heart problems. They were brain problems that were sending signals to my heart, and my heart was going, what in the flip? Because my brain thought it was still work time at 3 in the morning. So this is the most misunderstood aspect of how you operate. Your brain is not like a machine that you can just keep going and keep going and keep going. And particularly in a tech environment where you've got high cognitive load, you can't keep pushing the button and pushing the button and expecting to deliver well. You need to be accurate, you need to be creative, you need to be a good problem solver. You can't do that if you're doing that. So on average, take a break every 90 minutes, on average. And it's 20 minutes. And by the way, a break does not mean getting on your phone and doing social media. It means talking to people, juggling balls, reading a novel. Okay? And if your boss says, why are you wasting time? Send them to me. Okay? I'm serious. This is doing an enormous amount of harm. Okay, so that is what we do every day, and it's toxic to us. Number 3, meaning improves everything. There's a great book by Emily Esfahani about meaning and purpose. And if there's in Gallup, there's this sort of figure of 86% of people worldwide globally are either neutral, disengaged, or actively disengaged. And actively disengaged means they're outside in the car park letting the CEO's tires down, right? They're sort of destructive. The number one reason for that level of disengagement is the work is meaningless. Now, how many people in this room are doing work that they feel is meaningful to them, has a sense of purpose? That is really bloody high. Because normally when I ask that question, it's usually about 5 to 10% of people. That was about That's 80%. That's really, God bless you. Well done, you. Okay, so there's, just let me get my notes. Bear with me. Adam Grant, Give and Take. Highly recommend the book. He did a little experiment where a group of students were raising money from the alumni to set aside for a college grant for students who couldn't afford to go to that university. And it was kind of going okay, but then what Adam did is he brought in a student who'd experienced being given that grant and how much it changed their life, and that student talked to these fundraisers about what impact it had, and it improved their fundraising 171% in like 24 hours because it was more meaningful. Okay, so we are meaning-seeking machines, especially at work. Now, autonomy needs certainty. Remember Dan Pink? Oh, by the way, autopilot an aeroplane. How often is an aeroplane, when it's on autopilot, on target? Of 100%, how often is it on target when it's flying to, say, Barcelona? Shout out a random figure. Never? 98. 98? Okay, so it's only on target for about 5%. Who said never? You are very close. You get 27 bags of cheesy Wotsits. It's just getting better every day. Right, about 5%. So 95%, it's drifting from one side to the other. So when Dan Pink wrote his book, Drive, he talked about what people need in work is autonomy and mastery and purpose. He didn't quite get the autonomy bit right. People need boundaries, bounded autonomy. So one of the biggest impacts on collaboration is when people don't have clear boundaries. So autonomy is important. We need a sense of kind of license in how we do our work and so on and so forth. But the biggest arguments we see in teams is when somebody says, hold on, I thought I was doing that. Or isn't that part of my, yeah, does it sound familiar? So bounded autonomy is really important, and also because certainty is important to us at a really deep level. So a very quick example, part of Barclays was shutting down this one team. That team outperformed everybody else. Why? Because that team were told they were being shut down. It wasn't left uncertain, they were told. So they all worked their asses off to that end date so that they had a really good story to tell when they moved on in the workplace. It's a simple example, but your children need certainty, we need certainty, and so bounded autonomy is really important. Now, I'm going to show this. This is fairness. Hopefully this will work. And then I'll be wrapping up pretty soon. This is an experiment with capuchin monkeys.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees. But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes as a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Okay, now, why am I showing you things about monkeys? The reality is that they're primates with a very simple brain, but fairness is ingrained in their brain as it is in ours. So social cognition is shown when you scan people who experience things like unfairness. They experience a thing called social loss. And the part of the brain that lights up is the same part of the brain that lights up when you break your leg. All right, there's two parts. One registers physical pain, the other emotional pain. So the idea of sticks and stones don't break my bones, but names will never hurt me actually turns out not to be true at all. So fairness is incredibly important. And if you've acted unfairly, often unwittingly, it has an effect, a profound effect. So fairness is important in how you operate as a leader. Focus, the brain craves focus. Simple experiment done by the Navy SEALs. They needed to learn Pashtun to work well in Afghanistan. They found out it took 6 months. That's a long time to have highly paid people sitting in a classroom. They put them in sensory deprivation chambers, put them into a deep meditative state, and it reduced the time of learning that language from 6 months to 6 weeks. I am not making this up. Our brain is designed to focus on one thing only. How many people here have, when they're in the workplace, have Slack open or some other messaging channel like that, have their phone on their desk, have background noise? Okay, we are immersed in distraction. It's incredibly bad for us. Your brain is designed to focus on one task. We do not multitask, we switch tasks. When we do that, switching tasks constantly, it actually helps us produce stress hormones. Okay, number 7, trust and safety, psychological safety. I think probably in smaller operations, there's a lot more psychological safety. In big corporations, it's entirely missing. And psychological safety is the stuff that Google did, the research. It came out as the number one important thing in a high-performing team. That means we can cock up and we don't get our ass kicked. Psychological safety. We can be vulnerable and we're not going to be made fool of. So this is the water. Okay, this is the stuff that actually gets teams performing well. So if you've got a leader who belittles somebody or embarrasses somebody because they've cocked up, what they've done is they've killed psychological safety and removed trust in that environment. And the effects are enormous. That's when people start hiding mistakes. That's when you do a launch and then it just goes boom, because months ago somebody didn't say, I think I've cocked up. All good? Are we all happy? Have we learned something a little bit? Okay, jolly good. Now, psychological safety, as I said, this is Google's work, came number 1. Teams that are both high in trust and high in purpose blew away the competition. That's Paul Zak. So psychological safety is based on Paul Zak's work. He's a neuroscientist. And they did some research on medical teams. The high-performing medical teams also had the highest number of errors. And Amy Edmondson, the researcher, went, that doesn't make sense. The lower-performing team have got lower errors. What it turned out was the higher-performing team were honest and told people when they made a mistake. The lower-performing teams were hiding most of their errors. All right, this stuff has a big impact. Okay, team thriving. This is from Marty Seligman. I studied positive psychology, curing the negatives to not produce the positives. We have a kind of environment of what I would call problem solving. We're going to go and problem solve. That doesn't actually fix things. Okay, you need to create the context for thriving, not simply focusing on the negatives. It's a different mindset altogether, because we tend to go, right, what's the problem, you know, blah, 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 rather than actually what are we doing well and what can we do more of? All right, now the science is unequivocal. When you focus on strengths, everything improves. It's unequivocal. Alrighty? 2 simple interventions. So I'm wrapping up now. Firstly, set aside focus time for your teams. and for yourself if you're a member of a team. Get your whole team to do it. What I mean by that is you switch off all connected technology. Every single person in this room has one singular task they need to do in the morning. There's always one thing you have to get done. How many people get to the end of the day and go, I feel like I haven't achieved anything? All right? It's because you're constantly distracted. You're constantly firefighting. Ring fence no more than 40 minutes because your brain isn't used to focusing for anything longer than that. And in that 40 minutes, switch off all distraction. If you're in an open plan office, put a red baseball cap on that says something like F off. Explain to people why you're wearing it, obviously, don't be rude. But you need something that's a signal to everyone else to leave you alone, particularly if you're in open plan. And just do that one task and focus. It will improve your well-being. It will improve your productivity. It'll improve the quality of productivity, particularly if a team do it together. All right? That's how your brain was designed to work. It is a Neanderthal brain, really. It was never designed for 21st century work. The next thing is strategic breaks. Okay? Please, 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 micro breaks during your day. Please do that. And I would take regular time out, which is part of what I'm doing now. So this is not a pitch or selling. This is part of what I think is missing from how most people operate. So on most weekends, what people do is they drink, or they'll go to a party, or they'll do something that numbs them. Not everybody in this room, because you're full of purpose and meaning and your work is great and all of that kind of stuff. But many of the environments that I go into, people anesthetize themselves on the weekends. So micro gaps is, all the benefits of a gap year without the year out snag. It's about having so every elite athlete, every person who's in, a spiritual world, anyone who's in a religious order understands the benefits of taking time out. And so micro gaps is really setting a platform up so people can just take time out in various places around the country. And I'm just in the process of doing a deal with an extraordinary place run by a brother and sister. Beautiful, beautiful place. So that people can just come and chill out. Hand your technology in at the door, right? Even your kids can't ring you. Hand your technology in at the door, and it's up to you what you want to do. You want to sit under a tree? Sit under a tree. You want to nap? Nap. Remember naps? I remember naps when I was at university. That was about 5 years ago. So this is about instilling a habit of downtime. It's profoundly important to your well-being. So there you go. There are multiple other things I can talk about in terms of improving your team, but in terms of the context and the water, those 7 things, just do them and watch what happens to your team. It will improve, and I guarantee it. And it's very rare that people will ever come up here and say, I guarantee it, but I guarantee it because I'll just keep throwing the research at you to show you that this stuff really works. Are we all happy? Yeah. All right, great. We're done. I don't know how much time we've got left for questions. Oh, 10 minutes. I've done okay. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions or anything they would like to discuss? Yes, sir.
Let's say you're not a team leader but team member, and you notice that some of these environment in your team isn't meeting some of these standards. Do you have a strategy for improving it if you're not the leader?
So the question was, if you're a team member and you're not really in a great environment, and you notice a couple of these biggies are missing, is there a strategy for getting this stuff on the table? And the answer is, you take responsibility for it. And what I mean by that is, I'm happy to share with Nick a reading list, because the science is hard to argue. Part of the reason like if I said, look, collaboration will really work well if you're feeling a bit more positive. You say that to some leaders that I know, and they'll roll their eyes and say, seriously, take your tree hugger stuff and shove it up your backside. So the reason I have a reading list that I give out is because you can just put it under someone's nose and say, it's just the way it is. These are the facts. So Social by Matthew Lieberman, Power of Full Engagement, Flourish by Marty Seligman. All of these books are unequivocal that human beings are at their best when you focus on their strengths. Human beings are at their best when they're positive, in a positive state. They're at their worst when they're stressed, because they're in survival mode. And as soon as you go in survival mode, you start doing up your Nike trainers. You don't care about the person next to you, okay? So the honest answer is, my friend, you put the science under their nose and say, look, and do it in a way where the best phrase I've ever used is, can I just make a couple of observations? Because it's totally non-threatening. I've observed this and I've observed this, but I've read this book, and the science here is really quite extraordinary. And if you can deliver that to the team, little 10-minute, it'll make a world of difference. I don't think people go to work to be assholes. I think, okay, some do. I don't think everyone goes to work to be, they are creatures of habit. And if ass kicking got them to where they were, then they'll keep ass kicking until somebody puts something else under their nose. But it's changing enormously, so that it's kind of a long answer, but put the science under their nose. Don't try and persuade them yourself. Let the science do the persuasion. It's a great question. Thanks for asking. Yes, my friend.
So what do you think of the idea for motivation, that there's something that's core for your team, but then you also get a little leeway to work on something else?
Could you repeat the question again, just so I can understand?
What do you think of the idea that there's a team has a goal,
Yeah.
or has a group thing, but there's this idea that 80% of what you do can be for the team, and maybe you're given a little leeway to work on something that you're a bit passionate.
Oh, right, okay. That's a really good question. So it's, if you've got a team, you've got something you need to build, spend 80% of your time on that, but then you give people a little bit of leeway to work on what they're passionate about. It comes back down to bounded autonomy. So Atlassian were the guys who started this in Australia. So I was living in Australia when Atlassian sort of really kind of exploded. And they called them FedEx days, because you had 24 hours to produce something, right? And then FedEx said, we'll sue you if you keep using the term FedEx day. And so, okay, we better change it. That improved everything. It improved the quality of what they produced in their core products. It produced new products and new ideas. I think it's a great idea, but if you've got accountants who are running your business, they will look and say, hold on, 20% times 200 people times X amount of hours. Are you kidding? How much, right? Because that's how accountants run businesses. What Atlassian had was 2-3 founders, I think it is. There's a group of them, 2 founders. And so they were able to say, we'll wear that cost. And then they crossed their fingers because they didn't know if it worked. But what it taps into is intrinsic motivation. You know, that if we're working on something that's meaningful to us, you get much more kind of motivation, which spills out into the day-to-day job. So it's a great question. Thanks for asking. How much time have we got left?
We do Kanban at our place.
You're in Agile? An Agile environment?
Kanban, we're not Agile.
Okay, I'm just asking. Because I see people using Kanban in Agile environments as well, but
It's really what we're sort
okay.
with business on board. So we're allowed to work on 3 tickets at a time. Do you think we should just be doing that?
Oh, you're asking me a particular question. Do you think we should be working 3 tickets at one time in a camp?
Working on 3 things at a time or one.
Should we work on 3 things or just one? Jesus, it's actually a difficult question to answer because I don't know your context and I don't want to throw a hand grenade under your table. Personally, if you're working collaboratively on one thing at a time, you're going to get more juice. As soon as you spread to 3 things, then what you're doing is kind of splitting the focus of your brain, right? So, but it really depends. I mean, what you can do is have 2 or 3 people working on one aspect, 2 or 3 working on the other. And if you able to come back, so you have a mechanism where you can come back and check in, say, right, where you guys at, where you guys at, that's okay. But what I tend to find is, particularly in big environments, big tech environments, so like fintech, right? So I'm working for one of the big banks. They say, can you get this done? Oh, by the way, there's your business as usual work. And oh, by the way, one of the senior directors has seen an app he likes and we want you to develop an app. I've never developed an app. We'll start learning about app development, right? And that's when people get burned really badly. So my instinct is always to go back to basics. Our brain was designed to focus on one thing at a time. That's why traditional craftsmen and women always did one job at a time. If you were a wheelwright, or if you were a carpenter or a stonemason, and all of you in this room are the modern equivalent of that, right? It is a craft that you are developing that is changing the world, and yet we think that we can just sort of, I'll spend 20 minutes here and 5 minutes there, and it doesn't work like that. It's a really good question. Thank you for asking.
I'm just going to say, I completely agree with that. In that it's taken me 30 years to. I cook a lot, and when I'm cooking, my wife comes into the kitchen and finds a piece of paper and says, "Have you finished with this?" And you say, "I've got 3 pans on the go, and one of them's about to catch fire." So it's taken such a long time to actually learn the discipline to say, "Go away, and I'll tell you about it later."
Yeah, and so I'll do it. Really simple test. If everyone closed their eyes, I'm not going to do it now because we're kind of running out of time. I would ask you after this, close your eyes for 5 minutes and try and imagine a candle in front of you, and you're looking at the flame of the candle. And I want you to simply focus on that flame for 5 minutes. And I guarantee you, most of you won't get past a minute. And most won't get past 30 seconds before your brain gets, you look at the candle, go, right, looking at the candle, focus on the candle, actually talking of candles, right? And then the brain's off. You're back at work, or you're brushing your teeth, or you've got an errand you have to run. And so meditation, mindfulness, all of that kind of stuff is actually a training process about how to focus your mind, how to focus your brain. So when we're distracted, so I see people, I look at their environment, phones there, they've got at least 3 different icons with little red numbers next to it. You know, they've got Slack open, there's somebody opposite them who's chatting away on a phone, a lot of background noise. So open plan offices make a lot of sense to accountants, make no sense to me whatsoever when you're in a high cognitive load environment. And what it does is we, as I said earlier, not only do we produce stress hormones, it's also been proven that we speed up unconsciously. We start speeding up, right? And so people, the reason why we have this slightly increasing rate of anxiety, stress, burnout, depression, and so on and so forth, is predominantly because the technology has brought great blessings and great curses, as all great technology does. The Industrial Revolution was the same. So we're learning, and I've said this to every group that I've talked to, in the next 5 years you'll see legislation banning children of a certain age from smartphones. And it's already starting to happen. People are trying to introduce legislation because we're starting to understand this technology is very powerful. It was designed for adult brains, not an adolescent brain, and certainly not for a brain of a child under 10 years old. Now, I'm a passionate believer in technology. I wouldn't be doing like my businesses were technology businesses. You know, tech has changed the world, profoundly. But we also need to understand that how you're operating in a tech environment is actually really bad for you, most of the time. Okay, and if you don't look after yourself, nobody else will. And no job, and I know this for somebody who built a business that he cared about and then burned out as a consequence, nothing's worth it. All right, nothing's worth it. And the good news is, honestly, on a more positive note, when you start looking after yourself, the stuff you produce is that much better. All right, quality-wise, your level of creativity goes up when you're in a positive state. Your ability to see more opportunities goes up when you're in a positive state. When you're stressed, your brain literally does that because it can only see the threat. All right? So the science is unequivocal. Look after yourselves. Right, last question, because I think we've got 1 minute left.
So can I tell my wife that if I'm deaf whilst I'm chopping vegetables, that's a good thing?
That is a really good thing. So what was said is, if I tell my wife that I'm deaf when I'm chopping vegetables, is that a good thing? It's a good thing that you can get into that focus state. You may just need to explain beforehand, before you kind of, deliver the message in such a blunt way. So in the spirit of healthy relationships, if your husband interrupts you and it drives you bananas, I would give them some of the research and say, please understand that when I'm working, I need to focus. I love you to bits, but get stuffed, right? But, in a nice way. I'm going to wrap it up there because I think we're bang on 45 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll send my email address to Nick. If you would like the reading list, I'd be more than happy to send it out. These books will change your life, guaranteed, right? Again, I don't say that frivolously at all. They will change your life if you just read 2 of them. Okay, we all good? Yeah. All happy? Yeah. Thanks a million.